listening to The Donor Doctor Show, where your host, James Newberry, will help you improve the health of your fundraising. Now over to James.
Hello, this is The Donor Doctor, and I have a special guest this is our last episode. And we have Richard Viguerie, who is the founding funder of Conservative Direct Mail. But your experience really goes beyond. You're really like the Rush Limbaugh of direct mail, is what I described my son when he was asking me who you were. And you played a big role in the draft Goldwater movement. Is that correct?
Well, I was active. I wouldn't say I played a big role in it, but I was fortunate to be able to play a minor role in it. At that time, during the draft Goldwater period of 1962, 63, and then the Goldwater campaign of 64, I was either executive secretary of Young Americans for Freedom or, doing their marketing there. A little background is that as a teenager growing up in outside of Houston, I was kids in the neighborhood would play cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, and I didn't tell anybody, but I wasn't shooting robbers or I wasn't shooting Indians. I was shooting commies because I just kind of came into this world knowing the communists were bad people, and so I just was kind of consumed with fighting the communists. And I consider myself second generation conservative. First generation was Bill Buckley, Frank Meyer, Brent Bozell, Russell Kirk, etc. And second generation conservatives, almost 100% of us, before we were conservatives, we were first anti-communist. That was the big driving, motivating force for us to get into politics, public policy. So I'm just a young kid, active, interested in politics, consumed with it, quite frankly, I guess, in one sense, and had the opportunity of becoming president of the Young Republicans in Harris County in the late 50s, early 60s. And in 1961, I became executive director of Young Americans for Freedom, which was a political youth organization, had been founded a few months earlier, September 1960, on Bill Buckley's family estate in Sharon, Connecticut. And I ran the organization as executive secretary for about a year and a half. And during that period of time, I was reading everything I could that Bill Buckley had written, Russell Kirk, Frank Meyer, Brent Bozell, Adam Smith, Edmund Burke, etc. As a University of Houston graduate, I was way behind, all the people I were coming in contact with, such as Buckley and Bill Rusher, the publisher of National Review. And quite frankly, the young students who were running the organization, the board of directors, 20, 21-year-old kids from Harvard, Princeton, Yale. And so I tried to catch up with them. And after about a year and a half, I realized I wasn't making a lot of progress. And so I made a conscious decision to stop reading all the publications, magazines, books that I enjoyed reading, and throw myself into a major study of marketing, advertising. And I read everything I could get my hands on from about David Ogilvy had written, or Leo Burnett, or Rosser Reeves, or other giants out there. And after the Goldwater campaign at the end of 1964, I decided to leave Young Americans for Freedom and opened my own company, which I did on January 3rd, 1965. It was actually the world's first ideological political marketing company. And I was able to do that because in the summer of 1964, I discovered that if you were running for president, you had to file with the clerk of the House of Representatives in Washington all your $50 plus donors. So I went down there one afternoon, and sure enough, there was a big stack of Goldwater $50 plus donors. So I had a legal pad with me, and I started writing, and I came back the next day and wrote more. And after a day and a half or so of that, I realized I wasn't making a lot of progress. So I hired about 6 women to copy all of Goldwater's $50 plus donors, and ended up with about 12,500. And that gave me the confidence to quit a good job. And by then I had a wife and 2 babies. And And actually, I left with Young Americans for Freedom as my only clients when I started the company, and I lost that client within about 5 weeks. We're just going through a series of purges, and
seems like it always has.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't all bad. That's how we learned a lot of our skills. And a lot of conservative leaders at the national level today learn their politics in Young Americans for Freedom, either as being purged or purging others there. So, but by the end of 1965, those 12,500 donors had turned into 100,000 donors, because I discovered that if you had to file those donors, Goldwater had to file his donors with the clerk of the House of Representatives nationally. I wonder if you had to do the same thing in Austin, Texas, and Sacramento, and Albany. Sure enough, you did. So I went around the country getting all these donors from Goldwater, and ended up at the end of 1965 with 100,000 conservative Republican donors. By the end of the 60s, I had about 1 million donors, and now we have well over 10 million conservative Republican donors. And that's really been the lifeblood of our business there.
Now, it's interesting. One of my favorite books of direct mail was Secrets of Successful Direct Mail by Dick Benson. And, of course, he has a chapter on you. And the reason I like that book so much is it gave me the best. I finally saw how direct mail fundraising, whether to conservative or liberal, fit in the overall universe of advertising. Now, he was an advisor to you. What were the things, the takeaways that you learned from him?
Well, a little background on that. I counsel young people all the time to whatever you're doing in life, whether it's marketing, fundraising, or any other business profession, you want to have one or more gurus, people who can help you, learn the business, and mentors, if you would. And I was fortunate in my life to have 4. My first was Ed Mayer, who Ed in those days was the official teacher of marketing for the then it was called the Direct Mail Association. Now it's the Direct Marketing Association. But anyway, I went to a 1-week course that Ed Mayer conducted in May of 1965, and just fell in love with the man, and it was mutual. We had a good, close relationship, and I went to many of his courses that he taught for advanced direct mail, etc. And within a few years, we set up a relationship where he would come to my office one day a month. He did that for 7-8 years until he passed away, and just meet with me and my team, and just help us move forward in direct mail, direct marketing for the conservative movement. And he died suddenly in 1977. And a few weeks after he died, I got a phone call from a man who said, your guru has just died. Can I be your new guru? And I said, you've got the job. And that was Dick Benson. And Dick was just a giant, and you referred to his book, Secrets of Successful Direct Mail. And you'd be hard-pressed to find a book that was more important, more valuable for anybody in marketing than Dick Benson's one and only book that he wrote there. So I commend it to everybody. And Dick and I had the same relationship with Ed Mayer. He would come to my office regularly and meet with my team and myself. And then after a while, Dick said, okay, I'm getting too old for this, so anybody that wants to meet with me has got to come to Florida. So I continued to go to Florida to meet with him on a regular basis. And what I learned from Dick Benson as well as Ed Mayer, that there's just, quite frankly, not a lot of good nonprofit marketers out there. And so starting in early 1960s to this day, most of what I've learned about marketing, direct mail, the Internet, has come from the commercial world. And Dick Benson was a giant in the commercial world, as was Ed Mayer. And so I just, to this day, most all that I know, not everything, but I'd say 80% plus of what I've learned has come from the commercial world. And I learned things from the commercial world like lifetime value of a customer, or in fundraising, the lifetime value of a donor. And there's just so many principles that people like John Caples and others have to teach us about commercial marketing, headlines, et cetera. So I've often said that I wouldn't dream of flying in a airplane with a pilot who had the skills of the average nonprofit marketer. And
That's
so
great.
at age 84, James, I literally spend 2 to 3 hours, 6 days a week studying marketing. And I don't have a lot of competitors, in my opinion, that spend 2 or 3 hours a month studying marketing.
Oh, I imagine that. I could try to get a young copywriter to spend 30 minutes a week.
Yep.
Now, that 2 or 3 hours, is that mostly rereading the masters, or is it reading samples? I mean,
Well, it's a combination. It's reading samples. This morning, I've spent 30 minutes or so reviewing some sample mail that I've received from different commercial companies as well as nonprofit. But it's also reading new material. And it's not just direct marketing, but it's business books because actually, I'm helping to run a marketing company with 75 employees. And so it's a combination of business and marketing. But I'd say my main focus is on rereading the classics, and I'm just a big exponent of the importance of rereading the classics. There's about there's hundreds of marketing books, fundraising, etc., but I've identified about 15 that I think are just classics, and I reread those multiple times a year. And the reason I can do that is that I've underlined. I've got my own copy. I buy lots of these books and give them to others, but I keep my own copy of each of these classics, and I underline them. So I can go through a classic like Dick Benson's Secrets of Successful Direct Mail and underline what I've underlined and reread it in 20, 25 minutes. And invariably I will find things that I thought, oh my gosh, I forgot about this, or you've got to remember to do this or that. So we all, forget things. And so Dick Benson is on my list of must-reads, as is Seth Godin, and, of course, the giant whose shoulders we all stand upon, Claude Hopkins, who wrote Scientific Advertising. And when I first read it in the early 60s, David Ogilvy had written the foreword to it, and he said no one should be allowed to have anything to do with advertising until they had
7 times.
You got it exactly 7 times. Perfect. And
we're on the same. I agree with you, but you're in the minority. Most nonprofits or creative agencies don't value copywriting as you do, and of course, your agency is famous for its training program. I've had the benefit indirectly of having worked with a number of people who train through your company. But why is it that a lot of people don't value commodity? They see it sort of as a commodity, kind of like maybe the artist or list broker. But in fact, the difference between a good and great copywriter is huge.
Oh, it really is. And there are very, very few really great copywriters. Most copywriters, in fact, most people in marketing sort of feel like they take the attitude, what's the big deal about advertising or marketing? I learned to write in the first grade. I know where they sell postage stamps. I can do this. And they write with their gut. And none of us would go to a doctor who, if you had an attack of appendicitis, who learned to pull appendix just naturally. It's an instinctive thing. What we do is learn behavior. And it's kind of, you're looking for a deviant because it is not natural. You're looking for somebody that knows that a good 10-page letter will outpull a good 9-page letter. And this is learned behavior. And so as I said, I just, wouldn't fly in an airplane with a pilot who had the skills of the average person in nonprofit marketing. And by the way, let me just say that comment about the caliber of marketing or the skills of conservative marketers. And in the 1970s, when I was doing my pioneer work, late 60s, early 70s, I caught a lot of criticism. In fact, I was regularly criticized on NBC, ABC, New York Times, Time Magazine, Washington Post, and it was just unrelenting because I was involved with something called the New Right, and we were pioneering, going into a different arena like Newt Gingrich and Paul Weyrich and others out there, Ed Fullner at the Heritage Foundation. And I and others were regularly attacked. And I can remember very clearly all of the criticism stopped within a few hours. And a few hours was election night, November 1980, when almost collectively you could hear the political community out there, that's what Viguerie and friends have been up to. And so very quickly, the left realized that they had relied primarily on forced union dues, government money, foundation money, but they had not reached out to the grassroots. So they began to do that in 81, 82. And I told all my conservative friends, don't worry, it's taken me 20 years to do what I've done, and it's going to take them probably 25 years or more because I'm smarter than they are. Not so. Within a couple of years, in my opinion, the left caught up with the conservatives in terms of using direct marketing to advance their political agenda. And to this day, the left does a far better job than the conservatives do in direct marketing. And one of the many things that they do so much better is that they have maybe tens of thousands of what I call third force organization, not third party, but third force. Think of all the thousands and thousands of unions out there, the race-based organizations, the anti-family organizations, the environmental groups. If Obama called a meeting of all of the various environmental groups on the left, there'd probably be 300, 350 show up. If, say, Trump did the same on the conservative side, we'd have a half a dozen or so. So we need many, many more third force organizations because, most people are normal. They don't really care on a Monday evening to go out to a political meeting. In order to get people involved, you need to find the 1, 2, 3 things that they really are focused on. Maybe it's the failure of the local public schools. Maybe it's overregulation of small business. Maybe it's crime with some issue that they can get involved in. And then it's just a few steps beyond that before they realize that the person or the group that's causing the problems is the government, and then they become conservative Republicans. In 1964, Hillary Rodham is a Goldwater girl.
That's right. I saw that on a documentary, yeah.
And by the late 1960s, 69, she's a hardcore leftist, having nothing to do with the Democratic National Committee, having everything to do that she got involved in a single-issue group, a third force group, which was opposition to the Vietnam War. And then it was a short journey to become an active liberal. So people listening to us, I assure you there is a huge opportunity out there in terms of starting new conservative organizations that are desperately needed, or working for them and growing these organizations. In my opinion, we have an opportunity for exponential growth unlike anything I have seen in my 56 years of involvement at the national level. We've all heard about the large amount of money that the left has been raising since last November 8th election. And that's true. They're raising very large sums of money. But the same is true on the right. There are conservative organizations that are setting records out there. And I tell my conservative friends to keep in mind Newton's third law of physics, which is every action has an opposite and equal reaction. And so while the left is raising money, conservatives are frightened, they're concerned, they're angry, they're worried, and they are responding. If you have a good program and you've got good projects, there is no shortage of money. There's just a shortage of ideas.
Let me ask you about positioning, because it was such a major topic, and I've listened to all your podcast interviews. And I like the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, and I also have Positioning. This is by Jack Trout and Al Reese. What the law of leadership? Which of those laws are most? Let me ask you about this one, the law of failure. And a lot of people have a problem with giving up on something. They sink more money into it. What have you learned from those laws?
Well, I was introduced maybe 25, 30 years ago to Al Reese and Jack Trout. Trout just recently passed away of cancer, but Al Reese is still going strong. And whatever these two gentlemen haven't written, they used to write together. Now then later they wrote separately. But whatever Al Reese and Jack Trout haven't written about marketing may not be worth knowing about. They're just that good. So in reading them and Seth Godin and, of course, Dick Benson and all the other giants out there, I developed something that I call Viguerie's 4 Horsemen of Marketing. And there's very little that's original or new in there, but I put them together in a way that is, I think, hopefully it will help people understand and they can see clearly how to market their organization, their product, etc. And I'll explain each one in some detail here. But first is position. And position is nothing more than a hole, H-O-L-E, in the marketplace. And by the way, that's something you decide privately. Privately, you decide what hole in the marketplace do you want to occupy. And then second is position. And position is how you identify your hole in the marketplace, and that's something you do publicly. Third is benefit. Fourth is brand. Going back to let's use an example maybe of Rupert Murdoch and Fox Television. 25 years ago, Rupert Murdoch wanted to have a cable television network, and so he looked at the marketplace out there, and he identified a hole in the marketplace. If you're a conservative or Republican, there was no television network 25 years ago that you could go to and get news and information that you identified with. There was only the liberal networks of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, etc. And so he occupied a hole in the marketplace. And then he differentiated himself from his competition out there by hiring Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, Megyn Kelly, Glenn Beck, Fox and Friends, etc. So it was publicly, he differentiated himself from that competition out there. Third benefit, of course, he provides news and information for conservatives, his audience, that is not found anywhere else on television. Fourth is brand, and this is the ball game. It all revolves around brand, and just products these days are not sold; they're bought. I go into a supermarket, Wegmans, and close to where I live, and there are maybe 50, 60,000 items in that store for sale. Not one salesperson in that store, but there are people who will take my money when I'm ready to check out. But there's nobody saying, "No, Mr. Viguerie, today rather than buying Viva paper towels, why don't you try Bounty?" Thank you very much, but I'm a Viva man. I'm a brand person. And brand is very simple. People get confused at what a brand is. Brand is not a famous name. For example, United Airlines does not have a brand. And Delta Airlines does not have a brand. American Airlines does not have a brand. I suspect nobody listening to us now really cares whether they fly American, United, Delta. You just want a plane that leaves when you want to leave and returns when you want to return. Now, JetBlue that I flew last week has got a brand. Southwest has got a brand. Singapore Airlines has got a brand. So you want something that makes you unique, makes you singular, makes you separate in terms of Seth Godin's book, The Purple Cow. What makes you a purple cow? Separates you from everybody else out there. And when you learn these 4 things and you set your organization, your product up so that you've got a position, a differentiation, a benefit, and a brand, life will be downhill with the wind to your back. Get any of these wrong, you're going uphill in the wind in your face, and you're not likely to succeed.
One last question for you. I recently had lunch with a young copywriter, and he says, I don't know if direct mail will be around 10, 20 years from now. Now, people have been saying this for years. Well, what are your thoughts on the long-term
Well, James, you're exactly right. People have been saying this as long as I can remember, back in the 60s. But I listened to a podcast by my friend, my counterpart on the left, Roger Craver, a few months ago. And Roger talked about how direct mail is still the workhorse of direct marketing fundraising for ideological causes, charitable causes, health and welfare. Maybe 95% of the money raised between direct mail and the internet is raised by direct mail. Those organizations that are doing really state-of-the-art, cutting-edge work may be getting 10% of their income from the internet. That's going to change, but it might be 12, 15, or more years from now. But right now, direct mail is the workhorse. And if you stop your direct mail and focus only on the internet, you probably are going to be out of business sooner than later.
Well, it's interesting, but there's so much more attention given to email, yet the email open rates are dropping way more than the direct mail. Direct mail's held up well, actually.
Yeah, direct mail, the one thing, the vast majority of the people who give to an organization initially through the internet do not give again through the internet. They give through direct mail, because direct mail has the opportunity to provide so much more information than they do on the internet. I say on a good day, on a really, really good day, I've got 10 seconds. Usually I've got 4 or 5 seconds to get them, open the mail, get into my package, and make a contribution. On the internet, you're looking at 1 or 2 seconds before people delete your email there. And one of the things that direct mail can take an unknown cause, an unknown candidate, an unknown issue, and build a big support list from using direct mail. If your organization is basically unknown to the public, it's almost impossible to do that through the mail. Many times what the internet does is acts as a transmission belt. Obama was able to raise millions money, hundreds of millions of dollars through maybe 10 million or 3 million donors, 10 million supporters, because he was on the evening news, because he was on the cover of Time magazine, on the front page of the New York Times.
They were already pre-sold.
They were pre-sold, and they just used the internet as a transmission belt. But you couldn't launch his campaign on the internet as an unknown candidate.
Well, I appreciate you taking your time. I know you're a busy man, and I'm impressed. You still spend all 2 or 3 hours with all you know. That shows you how important study is.
Well, James, let me just add, I'm 84 years old. I go 13, 14 hours a day, 5.5 days a week. Do not personally know anyone that keeps up with me at any age. I hate to go to bed at night. Can't wait to get up in the morning, charge hell every morning with a bucket of water. And
great.
I'm as convinced as we are talking here that I've got a bigger front than a back, which means that whatever I've accomplished in the past is going to be dwarfed by what I do in the future.
That's the right attitude to have.
I just enjoy life. I've been blessed with good health. I work at my good health. It's not an accident. And so the opportunities are immense out there for those involved in cause fundraising. And I encourage everybody to think, that the best is yet to come.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being a guest.
My pleasure, James. Thank you.
Bye.